Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone. I was thinking before the lunch, well, to have a presentation before the lunch, that's not good. But then I learned that I have it after lunch, my presentation. But then I thought, okay, maybe that's even worse to have it after lunch, because really, if majority of you just drops off or sleeps. But anyway, you can just wave me that I can maybe stop. And so, my name is Zoltan Matyus. I'm from different field than majority of you. I am psychologist. And I really looked at your presentation when Mirek used the word sijet. I really didn't know what does it mean, whether it's something to eat or some clothes. But so it's really interesting for me to learn about your language, your work, the literary words you use. So my introduction. Timothea asked me to have a presentation, and I had nothing to think of first. Not because I wouldn't understand the words, but I didn't know the concept. My language, okay, the room of reading, okay, what is the room of reading? But it really sounded kind of crazy, so my attention was drawn to it, so I said yes. And my previous former profession is interior designer, so it attracted me. I didn't know how to deal with this. I sincerely didn't understand what is room of reading. Later on, Timothea explained me what is it about, kind of expression or developing the meaning or deeper thoughts. So I got into this topic and I said, okay, it is really interesting. It is a rich and really wide horizon to dig into. And I saw that I feel how children understand the world from the psychological aspect. So I was connected to this topic. So I was preparing my presentation, and this morning I listened to your presentation, and I realized I came to this topic from different point of view. I do not have a story in it. I do not have any kind of point in my story. So I really realized this. So I dealt with this kind of to create, because the instrument is only an instrument to get into the world of child. It has its advantages and disadvantages. However, I started thinking how to create a space, how to engage children into this space and engage with their emotions, engage in creating the story. And I believe that experience is important, like connecting element, whether starting and building up the relationship or seeing any kind of object or experience or having some kind of ability or skill, whether it is the beginning of having some kind of relationship to a story. This was the basis that motivated me to create this kind of link or connection in which I can put various kinds of artifacts. So children can decide whether they get into it or they stay in distance. And in this way, the story will be created by children on their own. When I was in this kind of space, I saw that the space is really rich to offer, and it offers kind of various schematical parts or topics. So I named my presentation "To Search is both the journey and the goal." So my first part of my presentation was the searching for a child, to search a story that doesn't exist yet. The child is the creator of the story. There is no story, but the child doesn't know that the child will create the story, but there will be a story. So to search, to seek some kind of meaning of the object, it goes through the child's interpretation, their experience. So this was the first part. Second part, to find it by creating. How was the concept? And the third part was sharing. Sharing as the last part in a kind of a reflection. I will talk about it later. So these three parts, children started with the first, went through second, and ended in the third part. So in this way, children make their own children. Timmy will then talk about it. This was some kind of experiment. I didn't know what children will do, whether the objects will attract children, whether children will have desire to work with it. I didn't know nothing about that. It was an experiment. So, of course, this was the practical part was responsibility of Timmy. So this was my goal, to create good conditions, and the life will start. So when we prepare good conditions, in children, in their DNA, they will engage, they will come up with experience and life. For example, there will be a child that will interact because there is an adult there, or another child will be drawn to some kind of special object. It is very different for every child, of course. For me, this process of searching, we called this room of reading the excavation of stories. This is the name of the room of reading. So the children found the objects and connected within one story. So this experience could be, for example, in creating one story together, or whether it was experience that I helped to create, or whether it is experience that I really experience in my inner world. I was working with art methods, and the goal of it was always fascinating for me, because children of various age, without having an abstract concept of art, they are able to react in a specific way. Their interpretation is intuitive, through their own experience, through colors, shapes, through the feeling that children really feel. This was my attitude to this, to develop the children in their conception of the space, or to read their own story. Every time there is important to get into it deeper, and every child can interpret it on their own level. Many times I mention this. It's kind of interesting phenomena. We have two modes. One is operational and second one is narrative. The first one, operational, suggests us solutions. It helps us to understand the situation. Operational mode has a goal and signals us what functions, what doesn't function. We may see it, for example, when a child wants a toy, we do not buy it to the child, and the child reacts with anger. And anger, the goal of anger is to get the toy anyway. The second mode is the narrative mode, experience mode. In this way, the child gets into the emotional level. The child finds out something deeper. For example, the coin. We have heard of it. And from the perspective of the coin, the child understands the feelings of the coin and so on. So, in this way, I believe nowadays it is very difficult, the position of pedagogues and teachers, in comparison with high tech today. It's impossible. A teacher cannot maybe give more stimuli than an iPad or tablet. Sometimes teacher is weary and sometimes his narration is not 100% exciting, and the child is today expects motion, action, and is drawn to high-tech technologies. And always time within 1 minute, the children are used to really play some games, video games, and to kill 10 people within 30 seconds. So when we compare high-tech stimuli and teacher, well, teacher has, it is great difference. So in this way, our desire is my desire is to really encourage you, teachers, pedagogues, to do this, to draw attention of children to them. It's very tough work. I know it. And I am familiar with this situation and with the mindset of children and young generation. And I see, yes, we have generation today that has thumbs that have the most used thumbs in the world during our history. So, when I was teaching, I taught design at high school, and for me it was the most difficult thing to draw desire of children to some kind of object. Sometimes when I look at little children, I see that it seems to me that as soon as a child is born, they are just annoyed. So this is my kind of mission, to help children to just go on. How can we make this? We need to draw children into the story. The children need to be part of the story. I don't know how it is possible to do, for example, during math lessons, but we can do it. We can do this. So these were 3 parts of Room of Reading named Excavation of the Stories. This was the first part. Just imagine, the children entered down the room. Just before that moment they entered, I prepared maps in aquarelle paintings. I may send it to you, I may show it. I don't know whether you may see it, but they had these kind of paintings in an A3 format. And we called it as a map of stories. And Timothy then will later tell you how we worked with it. You can look at it closer, please. So, right before the child entered the room of reading downstairs, children picked one of these papers. They have some kind of motif. First, we wanted them that a group will choose one, but then we decided, okay, it's better is that each child picks one, because therefore by picking it, the child is engaged already in the story. So please, I will hand it now. You may look at these pictures. So as soon as children entered this room of reading, they entered while having in their hands these kind of maps. The maps were not connected with the objects, but children were engaged in this way. And then they decided which objects they wanted. Yes, we may put there some kinds of objects, but this process engaged the operational mode in children. So, and at the same time, there is also the narrative mode. A child decides for one map, so the narrative mode is activated. It was really new for me. And when I talked with Timothea, I told her, well, I don't know, I'm not sure whether a child can react in such a little age to it. And then we saw the children really reacted. It really encouraged me. The children, without any kind of knowledge, they are able to have experience from a masterpiece or piece of work. Yeah, this photograph, it is before entering the room? No, it is right in the room of reading. So children entered the room of reading with the map in their hands. So what do children do with the map? With these pictures, they take it in their hands and they have it. So they have it in their hands. Yeah, you look at the scanned pictures, not the original ones, so the colors are a bit not so bright, but children really saw in the pictures also colors, shapes, something abstract, and children picked one of those. They had decision, and we talk about it, we connect. There is social level. Both of us, me and a child, are looking at the picture. We explain, we share together. You know, every digital reality, okay, maybe sometimes they are able, but till this time it was connected through some kind of screen. So in this way we draw children to start contact with us. We cannot command child to have it. Maybe when a child, we will tell a child, you will not have mobile phone for 1 week. So maybe children will react and do it. But this is only not voluntary. It is only because not to be punished. We have 2 students, okay, 2 children. One child, the motive is to avoid punishment. Second child is drawn by some kind of desire or some kind of experience. This is the positive mode. Both children reach same evaluation. However, the way how they got there are absolutely different. So many digital strategic games are based on the mode of avoiding punishment. So, for example, I don't want to be killed in this video game. I don't be defeated. I don't want to be the last from the whole group. This is a very interesting phenomena. We do not know the consequences of this. Neuroplastics says it forms atmosphere of our mind. So if our everyday bread for our mind is negativism, we became negative. Therefore, children then interpreted the maps. And then they entered the rooms, and then they picked and they chose any kinds of objects without any instructions, just how they want it. You may see there is a map always with them, and this is the first room. So this is the map, and the children look at the objects, from many objects, really. And they chose some of them. For example, personal objects, functional objects, pieces of cloth. Some were hidden, for example, in the bags behind. So we see the map. Always there is a map in their midst. How the map was connected with them, Timmy will talk about it later. So this was the first part. You may see in the picture the room. So children entering into the room with the map in their hands. And in the black bags, Timothy came up with this idea. We put some objects also inside of the black bags. They didn't know what is inside. They didn't know what they find out. Some were just laid down on the tables, on the ground. Some were hidden. So this process of seeking, searching, the process of excavation is really important. 2 weeks before Christmas, children are activated because they think they can find some Christmas gifts before. And if children really know what they are going to get, maybe they will not be activated so much sometimes. However, I imagine it in this way. I thought, okay, children will come and just go through the black bags, and maybe without any kind of reason, they will choose some objects. So this was the first room. Yeah, I imagine it this way. This was what I really wanted to children to do. Yes, a child motivated to find something. This girl doesn't know what is inside, and sometimes either the girl can keep it or they can just leave it there. They can change their mind and can choose. So this is the interaction. Also interaction between a child as an individual and a group. Sometimes children had to deal with this. Imagine, okay, there is an object. Somebody will find out, okay, there is an object that is connected with your memory of your granddad that already died, and you want that this story will go this way. But the group will say, no, this doesn't belong, this object, to our story. So in this way, the child can decide either to just leave it, okay, or to stand for their idea and to say, yes, I want this to be a part of the story. So to implement or press, to push through it. So this is kind of responsibility or option for children to just form the group, form the story. Maybe you play the game during the class, somebody draws something, and then another one came and added to it, and the story just went in some way. This is very interesting, this element of a child, how the child deals with it. Of course, then we uncover the family background, assertivity, how the child is able to choose an object, whether there is a mother that really decides about everything about the child, and the child is not able to decide alone. And we may see that some children really just cannot choose any kind of object, because this child will see one, second, third, fourth black bag, but is not able to make decision because their parent always decided. You may see in the picture, yes, there is a child, the girl, really happy. We see the interaction. Other element is, in case there were other adults in the room, we see also it connected with children, but we will not talk about it. However, this was the first room. So now we come to second room. The second room is named the Excavation, archaeological excavation. So there is a sand, and in the sand there are many objects hidden. Children come and with their hands or other tools, they try to find objects. And in this way, children get to know the process of searching, of seeking, of excavation. What does it mean? There is symbol. When I want to find something, I need to search, I need to seek. In general, this is a problem of this generation. Children do not know what does it mean to mean hungry, to be hungry. In your presentation, it was mentioned. Nowadays, doctors just say when and what we need to eat. Maybe you will agree with me. If a child finds everything without searching, the child will never think of searching. They will never be motivated to look for something. Of course, in majority, right before great inventions and findings, it preceded of great and deep searching and finding. In this way, children will never learn to learn. They will not get to the process of searching. For example, in some of theoretical objects at school, when I do not put it into practice, into experience, children will never learn to search for anything. This is the problem. How to find the motivation of children, to motivate them to find something. So you may see through haptical process and process connected with each other to search together in a group. Children love to have this experience and share it together. So this was the concept. They do not know what is under the sand. In the black bags, they saw it. They could put it back. But here, in the sand, there is the experience of finding. When a child gets into the story, this is very important. Sometimes children want to know how the book ends, because he's curious. However, there is a parent or a child or a teacher that leads him through the whole process of reading. And this is the third part that I named the sharing. In the morning, we had it in one presentation. The sharing, the narration that goes throughout the history. Look at the picture. Children are all around in the circle sitting. Imagine that there is fire inside. And they talk, they share with each other. There are the objects. Children are having their objects, they have the maps, and they create together the story. Therefore, the children are engaged into the story. Look at this boy. It is a story that, okay, maybe it is a boy that just isn't engaged in the story. He's having his own story. So we may see that the group really covers various individual characteristics of children. So when there is a problematic child, in today's time, the group will say, no, we don't want this. Recently, I was in one situation that there was one problematic child, and parents really wanted to get rid of this child because it was really problematic child. Okay, there is a problem with the child. There is some motivation why the child is really problematic. But we have this message. We as a majority, we decide who can be here and who cannot be here. Okay, there are children, dynamic children, really active children. Then we have other types of children that, okay, is a bit slower. And then there are children, I just imagine, I don't know, I just imagine. I just say that there are observers, children who just observe. And I look at those all types of children and I'm really drawn to interact with all of them. So in the picture we have children sitting in the circle. There is music, fire inside, in the midst of them, in the center. It is really strong experience. Of course, if there is some kind of destructive element inside of the group. So, from the first part through second until the third part of this room of reading, we concluded with common experience. When a child succeeds with something, the child runs to the mom or father and shows it to him, and children want to be appreciated. We are sad when we have nobody to share with our experience, our things that we enjoy and we do not enjoy. It's basic for our relationships. So, during this third part, children still have their objects in their hands, and here we create free space, and it is very important. Our creativity is limited by fear many times. Maybe you don't realize it, but the child that has narrative creativity but gets into fear, amygdala is activated in their brain, and therefore the child who would be able to really have a great speech, but at that moment the child is paralyzed and cannot just tell a word. And we say, you don't know that question, you don't know the answer, just sit down. We call this some kind of social death. Some of you who learned other languages, foreign languages, you know the feeling, okay, I really am under stress to speak this foreign language. It is the same principle. When a child says some stupidity, others would laugh at this child. And if this child experiences this many times, that other laughs at it, maybe this child that looks as an introvert has 5 good ideas, but will never say a word. So we need to understand that I have to look at this child and I need to do something. My question is, what shall I do to draw out from this child all his potential? Look at people who do sports. like 5 minutes before the end of some kind of sport event. Or, for example, just few minutes between doing your presentation, giving your presentation. You just are under stress. Or why is it that after the test or examination we know the answer to some kind of questions? So do we have this creativity or not? Yes, we have this creativity, but if I get in my inner world to stress, the amygdala is in responsibility of survival. It's not about beauty, poetry, but it is only about operational mode, because the goal is to survive. So this way the narrative mode is stopped and the operational is activated. So it's connected with my life, people around me, my relationships, because we see the operational mode functions.
Let's have a look at this wonderful photo. There are a couple of boys really looking at the same picture. He is even forgetting that he has Coke in his hands. He is not drinking anymore, and that is a wonderful thing. They are not right now fighting, running away from monsters. They are just looking at the picture and really sharing their ideas and finding out new things, cooperating even. Many wonderful elements. And what is really wonderful, it's just a piece of paper. It's not going to fight you back. You don't have to update it. You don't have to upgrade. It's very symbolic and very cheerful that it's not about just having a certain stimuli, it's about having a certain stimuli that is we just do not develop enough. And I think that is very key in today's world. Because we are just undersaturated with this good stimuli and oversaturated with technical elements. So the boy was in a safe distance, and now coming closer, here the children looking very interested in that. Also, this boy who has his own story, looking at a different picture, he is waiting for lunch maybe, or for coffee break, I don't know. But here in a group we can exist and share. I can stay there with my own ideas. I can interact with the group, even though I keep some things inside me. I'm thinking about my ideas, and that is the reality of social interactions. The journey is not just a waste of time, it's a journey to the goal to even get there. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much, Zoli. And this was the room of reading. Of course, every room is different, but this one was always a journey for me. From the time that it started until now that it has ended, and you saw that this room was full of abstract stimuli, because I thought initially that we will just work with the searching of the story and then we'll use the maps. But of course that was really not possible to do it that way, because when the abstract part or level, during the first time we had children, 8th graders, it was very difficult for me, because the abstract model with the teacher was expecting it to be very educational, but she was not really perceiving the search. And this kind of setting created for children also a couple of options how to react. And since they were 14 years old, they were creating smaller groups, and they had their own dynamics since they are classmates and wanted to share their group dynamics with me, but there was their teacher who was covered maybe, and really I didn't see her for quite a long time because she was a little bit smaller, 14-year-old kids are quite tall, and I saw that I would need to work also to create a basic storyline, because a narrative has one great characteristic, and it doesn't matter if it's scenic, as theater, as Mr. Professor said in the beginning, but we are connected and we have a common goal to solve a conflict, or it's read or listened to, but the story connects us and it starts to socialize us in the given environment. And I used the story of Jan Milčák about the giant and his brother, and that is maybe an art that is similar to legends and myths, but we used maybe 3 sentences from the story. Those three sentences gave us the introduction, where the giant has a boy on his thumb, and he's always forgetting his name, but they are somewhere in an environment of a meadow. There are bees buzzing around him, and those were my characters. So I will give them characters, because it will be the different room, because first, second and the third was based on the studies of environment, where the environment helps us direct in the story. So the scene is created by the environment. And we suddenly had a giant, and the children were in typically lost in the symbolics of the story. And I just created the problem, and what is the giant like? Is he good or bad? Because in the fairy tales he can be both. This giant is good, and the key moment was that which boy would sit on the giant's thumb if he was bad. So what do you think what was before and what is after those basic adaptational techniques? I wanted to widen the concept of the giant. So we had a prologue of the situation, so that the small boy Benon sat on the thumb of the giant. Why did he sit there? What happened? And in this way, we had certain characters that were created in the room and had their characteristics. And I was innerly really happy that we are creating certain borders and we are thinking about who is okay to be in my space and who is not. The second thing was that we started to read the maps, and it was really incredible experience because, as I was mentioning during the lunch, it was visible that the children could not read the pictures because Zoli created wonderful aquarels that were very differentiated and were very methodological and could develop the imagination or the visual stimuli because it was one of the most basic pictures, that is one portraying a window, because you maybe did not notice because it's a map, some illustration, but the point of this picture is that it's a window to what? Or from where, or who lives in the house? Is this the house of the boy, of the giant? What is behind the window? And when the children were talking, they thought it's a dog house, or it can be a shed, or it can be a railway station or a tunnel. It can be a castle, since we are in a fairy tale. It can be a gate outside of the city, and then we stepped on the journey. And are those trees? Are those persons? And it started to be interesting because any topic that we started and we have described the picture, it also changed the options of the story. I did not give them any ideas, but they started to give what they were talking about, because it's important in narrative that the topic is directing us into a certain storyline and our internal processes are changing. It was also very interesting that because this is very easy, and the dynamics of the group started because they did not decide whether to choose this map because it's very simple, or are they up for a bigger challenge, and it was also very funny. So I will give you the picture so you are in contact with it. We have this picture, which they found out that it can be an environment, but what kind? It can be a kingdom of flutes, and who did the giant meet? Or it can be a large grass, lemongrass or something. And what is the connection between this building and the building behind the window? And why did we stop there? Is that just a part of the road? Is it a good road? Is it straight? And do you hear what we have in the narrative? What is the most important event? If we have chosen this, it was a different interpretation of the story. Then we have this picture, that is, I kindly reminded him that we have steps in the middle. Why they are so? We had different types of worlds. We have a fascination of a construction that maybe reminds us of certain technical objects, or they often said it's a harbor. So that was also full of options, and this picture was also really wonderful we had a magical moment because they at some point thought it were just pipes, but they also found out that it can be a person because it seems like some kind of depth. So we were inside a cave or maybe a mine, and maybe we could excavate, or we have some miners working there, or we have some sort of sacral pictures, because children often identified this as Jesus Christ. And without thinking about it, they wanted to have it in their story. And of course, the teachers were scared of what we put there, and they often said no religious topics. When you have created a discussion based on creativity, and of course you cannot do it so, when the children often got scared when the teachers said, no, stop, no religion. And of course we have this map, why there are just letters, couple of letters, there are persons, or can it be maybe a countryside, was there a war, is there some blood on the picture? And the more we talked about the map, the more narrative they had and opened more and more possibilities. And I can remember about this picture because a couple of groups look at this one and said, oh, it's the head of a soldier, of a knight. And one day it really shocked me when I had a group of 7 to 8 years old, and they told me it's the head of a knight, this and the circles, those are his feelings, and these are his ideas, and how the brain of the knight works. Because I did not expect that, because they started to create a story around that. And I did not focus on going exactly according to map, I just reminded them, but the important tasks happen inside, but sometimes we had to have 2 or 3 maps, because the children did not want to choose, and based on the objects we had different characters. And that was also a very interesting moment. And also my intention, which I did not want to share with Zoli immediately, but my idea about the sex, black sex, would also be about the creative language, because the creative language is used in narrations, so that the children experience that when we are talking, there is something visible and something invisible. And the invisible is in the black sex. The visible things, as I mentioned, the children that are very materialistic go in, touch it, look at it. And then we had certain instructions when we need to touch and when we don't need to touch. But I told them it's because of your brain, so that experience it. And the object inside the sack was the hidden invisible thing that is in the background and can influence the story, but they did not know that it's their thing they have to take care of. It's the precious thing they care of. And according to the group, I sometimes changed the instructions. I sometimes allowed for each of the children to get their own precious object, and when I thought that the group can handle it, I gave them one common precious object, and they had to cooperate, and the children in the first room had to choose and to ask, do you think this will be effective in the story if we have this? Very important instruction was also that if you choose an object in the first one, you cannot choose in the second. You can look, but you cannot take it. And if you choose an object, you cannot give it back, or you can give it back, but cannot choose another. So you work with the thing that it's lost. And that is very important instruction, because in many cases it developed the ownership of objects. And also they realized that sometimes it's 50-50 chance to make a decision in life, which was kind of cruel, yes, I admit. And when we came, there was an archaeology songs or findings, and I wanted to achieve two things. One, that they do a real excavation, so they get to know the tools, the little hammers, and the brushes. And I wanted to give them the idea, the stimuli, that the things that are deep inside are very precious. And I cannot be brutal with that. I have to be gentle. I was living in dorms with archaeologists, and I really know that they really are gentle with these findings, archaeological findings. And I wanted to teach that to the children, because the smaller children are learning their fine motorics, and they were really bent down and really gently rushing through the sand, not like a dog. And they cleaned the thing and were searching for the ideas that are behind that thing. And the second important thing I wanted to teach them is that when they dig deep, you go through all of the levels and you see them all. But each of these layers should show you a different story that happened at a certain time as you go in the past. And when nothing happens, you just find one layer with a certain components that are probably connected. But what if there was an earthquake? If there was a war? Everything gets scrambled. Things that were deep go up, and the other way around. So the mastery of archaeology is to find the story, what is connected with what. So in the excavation works we found some components, but we had to think about how they are connected and how they are connected between each other and to our story. And of course we were talking about the layers and seeing the layers. And of course then we had the third part, that would be the true narration. Because I think many problems would get resolved if we had narrators in our families. Maybe not even parents, grandparents, anybody who can talk about flowers, their journeys, their experiences. Because I think when the narration is theatrical, because if you think about old narrators, it had also a dramatic character. I took a drum with me, and I was drumming. It depended on the group because I wanted to get with rhythm, pulsation, to create atmosphere or emotion, and when the children could perceive it, I was doing it, but not always. Of course, I had this vocal background because I needed to create a couple of impulses to create the thread, even though there is silence. When there is silence, people get nervous. And I did not want. I wanted them to perceive the continuity of the story. So we got back and we reconstructed the story that we have experienced in all of these rooms. And we have engaged people. I was changing the narrative. When I found out that the group is going through something, I did not want them to be in the third person, but I changed them into first person. And that was important for the story as well. And to this story, they had to incorporate the precious object which they took care of. When Zoli was talking, I was taking notes. This would be a story. I will not give you the whole story, but it is a story of second graders. Without mentioning the names. The boy, after concerning, took a decision to take a piece of cloth. And when creating a story, he said it's a cover, it's a blanket for the boy that was sitting on the giant's thumb, because it reminded him of the father that died. The other classmates were really empathic and wanted to create in the story when the father was buried at the island with the map, with the letters, and the giant and the boy went to visit the island. They had different adventures on the journey, but when they really came to this wonderful island, the island was there, because you can they saw blood on that picture. They had many adventures, and when they finally came and gave the blanket to the place where the father was buried, the father came back to life because Benon was very sad and wanted the dead to be alive. And then, when the dead was alive, they sent a message to their mom, and she came back and had another piece of blanket, and that is how she found the little boy. And then they decided they will stay at this island and live there happily ever after. It was one class, and they were very perceptive. It was not one word exercise, but it was very nice interaction. They had flow, smooth flow. It was a narrative that it really flows. This boy, Philip, was talking the most, but the others gave him space, but were not distant. I had many such cases. I cannot name all of them. We had children with different disabilities. We've had integrated autism children, autistic children, and we had wonderful orientation in that space where they could find their own space, create the story. They were not angry or dissatisfied, didn't have any breakouts. So it was an amazing experience, which I could really give you lots and lots of examples of. And it was also shown here that the potential of the room of reading was bigger than we had fulfilled. But what was important, that the children could experience. They could experience their space, so they were active on their own, but they were safe in being active. They could choose how they will move in the space of the story. From my side or from the other side or from the space did not give them any clues or give them any options how to behave. So they had to choose. And they had to, for example, we had old photos and they could decide whether they will implement it in their stories. Or we had shoes. Is that relevant for the story? And that is important because really children have now problems with fantasy and using it, because here in the room of reading we had a greater chance because the concept enabled them to work with realizing in the excavation work that everything does not need to be included. And then they had a group regulation, because when the story starts to go, the story should make certain sense. And I let them experience failure because I stopped the story and I did not let them finish because I wanted them to experience failure. And what was also important in this room of reading is that I saw that at the end we usually gave stones to children, which they could take as a reminder of the contact that they were in the room, and they can find also stories on the little stones. And the children were very insensitive, or adults forbade them to take the stone because they don't want to have it at home. So can you imagine how hard it is when you want to take something, the little stone, which I loved, was suddenly forbidden by adult, was not accepted. So that was also an interesting fact. And one another experience, very intense for me, because when we have a distracted group, it's very hard to orientate because children can give you many different concepts. And if you are a facilitator, it's hard to choose which line to use, and that is one layer, and that is their development, individual development of their thinking. And I had one group that I felt like working really hard with, and I could not get them to cooperate. We were sitting in that circle and the story was not flowing. At that times, it's very helpful to create a neutral space, for example, the drum, and sometimes I have to help myself in another way, and this time I used a poem. And I love this poem from Daniel Javier. It is, I walk, walk, walk because I had to, because if I stay in one place, I will not meet anyone. I love the poem, and I wanted to stop with the story, and now we will try to teach this poem, so you will kind of repeat after me, so you get to know. And we maybe repeated it 5-6 times, and suddenly it was like being hit by electricity. You know, we cannot create a story because we hate each other. And I was not reacting to that, but I continued that we had such a poem that we are here and will walk, walk, walk further. But can we repeat it? Can we repeat the poem? Because we want to remember. When we meet you somewhere in the city, we want to remember to tell you the poem. So they created a relationship with me, but it helped us to create a story at the end, because it was a space that was more neutral for cooperation. If they were doing their usual thing as their group, as they don't like each other, they could not do it. So this is one of the things that happen in the room of reading, and it can give you also wonderful ways of common thinking and experience as poems. One more thing maybe to mention. Maybe up to date, I think we had 1,500 children in our rooms of readings. I do not have the exact numbers, but that is not only about having the children walk through, but it's having intense contact, and I try to have an audio from each room of reading, and I hope there will be a time I will have the chance to assess that. So this is a very pioneering presentation, but I will do great research of that because I think those are the real treasures. Thank you for your attention.